Again, my name is Mike Mechtenberg. I'm a program manager at Metro Transit. And for the last few years, I've been focused specifically on improving the speed and reliability of bus routes, primarily local bus routes. And right now, our focus is on Route 3, which in part serves your neighborhood. So kind of stepping back, the goals of this project are, right off the top, to improve the speed and reliability of service, to improve accessibility at the bus stops, improve customer and then our operator satisfaction. So we want people to have a better experience riding transit. And we also want to have our operators enjoy what they're doing a little more so they can do a better job for you. But before I get into too much detail about Route 3, I just want to give a quick overview of this new initiative. It's, I'm sure, very new to people, called Better Bus Routes. Essentially, it's an investment in our local bus service. So I think many folks are familiar with BRT, the Bus Rapid Transit program that Metro Transit is as leading. We've got a couple of lines out there and more in the planning process. BRT focuses on many of the same goals that we are with Better Bus Route. It's just they're doing it at a larger scale. So what we're saying is our approach is lower costs, maybe more common sense improvements that we can turn around at a faster rate than a BRT project could. So this began with a pilot project in fall of 2018. We did Route 2. Route 63 changes were implemented last year, and we're currently working on Route 3 with implementation anticipated in fall of this year. The goal here is to do a new one of these projects every year or two. And I think if we can reach our stride here, we can probably do one of these every year. And there's our website if you want to get more information offline. So what are some of the elements of a Better Bus Route project? I've broken it down really into four or five major strategies of improvements. The first here is stop consolidation. So in our region, the regional guidelines say stops for local service should be between 1/8 and 1/4 mile apart. I would say we have defaulted in the past to 1/8 of a mile apart. And on certain routes, it really just feels like you're stopping just so frequently, stopping every block. And so a big element of speeding up services is just stretching it out a little bit so where you're stopping every other block. And that's not uniform across the entire route. There still will be stretches where you're stopping every block. It really depends on the route geography and land uses. Actually, there's a whole list of considerations here. But the graphic here is really to describe, here's our typical local route spacing where you've got these very frequent stops. You could argue that has the best access for folks. On the other end of the spectrum, you have BRT. Those stations are typically every half mile. And what we're saying is we're trying to split the difference there, where we want to retain really good access for folks, but we know they want a faster ride. So we're stretching those stops out to every 1/4 mile. Here's a list of some of the considerations. Existing stop spacing, what is the ridership of the different stops? How is it used? Is it a key transfer point? Are you transferring to other routes? Looking around the site, is it near a school or a drugstore or a senior building? We want to be context sensitive here. And then limited mobility boarding. So we're able to get information on where folks that have limited mobility go-to cards are boarding. So these are 5 of, there's probably another 5 I could go through, but for our project, we really talk through, the project team talks through each and every stop, and here are some of the considerations. The next one is improving accessibility. When this project is done, we want to make sure that every stop on the route is ADA compliant. So this Seems like it's setting a pretty low bar, and it really is. But many of our stops today are not ADA compliant. You'll see some images of those coming up. So as part of this process, we have already gone out and done an audit of all the stops, taking the measurements, looking at the slope, and anything that is not meeting the stringent criteria of the ADA, we would make improvements to. Adding bus shelters. So shelters are not going to be at every stop, not by a long shot, but the goal is here to really focus in on this single route and place a shelter wherever there's a stop that meets the requirements. There are a lot of other stops in our system that meet the minimum requirements for a shelter that don't have them. And we're saying we're trying to make a really concerted effort on this specific route, Route 3, to raise it up. And part of that is by adding shelters. I will say another side benefit of stop consolidation is that you will have then more people boarding at the remaining stops, which give those a greater chance of receiving shelters. And then the next one here is route simplification. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Route 3. I'll kind of walk through a map of it in a minute, but what our goal here is to try to simplify the routes. And there's 2 or 3 different elements to that. One is the physical route alignment to try to straighten out the lines, fewer turns, and fewer branches, so that more of the service that we're providing is on what you call the trunk portion of the route. And then the other big aspect of this is the schedule simplification. So a route, and I would say Route 3 is really the poster child for this. There are a lot of what we would call short line trips. So these don't go all the way to the ends of the route. They sort of start and stop in the middle of the route. It's a way for us to provide more service where it's needed, but it also adds a lot of confusion to the route. So you might be getting on a trip that you think goes to downtown St. Paul, but it actually just goes to Energy Park Drive or other things like that. This route in particular has a lot of these short line trips. And so we're trying to clean those up a little bit so that it's an easier route and schedule for folks to understand. Here are some other things that we are considering. Transit signal priority, which is a way for us to move through signalized intersections a little bit faster, increasing the frequency of service. This is not necessarily something we're doing for the 3. We had funding to do this for the 63 last year, but we're unfortunately not doing it for this project. And then looking at other transit advantages. So, transit signal priority or TSP, that's a type of transit advantage, bus lanes or curb extensions or queue jumps. There's a lot of other things. That's a whole other list right there of other ways. Some are big, some are small, but for the bus just to kind of get a little bit of travel time benefits. So for each route, we really want to make sure that we're not missing anything in terms of these smaller transit advantages. So why are we looking at Route 3? Well, it's at least pre-pandemic, it was one of our very best routes. Had 73, almost 7,400 weekday boardings, and was our 6th busiest back in 2019. Obviously, those numbers are very different today, but it's still one of our, top ridership routes. I already mentioned it has a very complicated route schedule and structure, so I think it's a good candidate for a little cleanup work. We occasionally, I wouldn't say it was frequent, but we occasionally did receive comments about the stops being too close together. And at least at the time this project started, it hadn't been identified for BRT improvements. So I don't know if you're tracking the BRT, the program updates. They just released their next set of routes, and this is actually on that list. It's in the top, not only on the list, it's in the top tier of future BRT quarters. So that's great. When we started, it wasn't on a list, but I would just say the changes that we're making are totally consistent with the same principles that the BRT planners and that team is going to be working with. Again, streamlining the route, simplifying the schedule, just making it easier for people to ride. Here's a map of the route. So let's see here. We're primarily, you'd be interested in the eastern half of the route, but one thing I just want to point out here, not that you have to understand exactly what's going on here, but you can, I think, see pretty clearly that there are a number of different branches. You've got that Elm-Kasota branch with limited service. You've got the Energy Park Drive versus Maryland branches. And then each of those letters that you see on the line, those are different, either short lines or branches, and it gets very complicated very quickly. So I can't promise that it'll just be perfect. It'll be just, every trip goes end to end, but we're trying to nudge this route and this schedule in the right direction.
Michael, Rich has a question at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Take a minute for him? Yeah.
Sure.
Hey, thanks for, I wasn't sure I raised my hand right, but I guess I did. So to understand, so if we're trying to make it more efficient and space the ridership, but if I think you're trying to maintain a schedule, are you looking to get to less buses? Because if I think of more stops, then the schedule must be bad. There's kind of like a conservation principle here that I'm finding, or thinking about, right? Does that make sense? My question, I apologize if it's not clear. So for example, you want less stops, then you want to move more timely, but you're trying to maintain a certain cadence of the bus flow schedule, right?
Yes.
It's been a few years since I rode the 3 to the University of Minnesota, but yeah, I understand. So if you stop at every corner, it's less efficient, but if you stop less frequently, then you move more timely, then you're going to sit more longer at the corner.
Well, I mean, so we're going to update the schedule to reflect anticipated travel time savings. So
you still want to carry the same flux of people, right?
Yeah, I mean, certainly the goal is to carry as many or more riders as we are today.
Okay.
What we would like to do is pick those people up at fewer stops, and in some cases that means more people getting on at a very a stop that we're always stopping at. In other cases, yeah, and we would adjust the schedule.
Okay. Because I spoke
essentially
a bus every half hour, for example, or 20 minutes, or whatever the normal interval is today, because you're trying to still get the same flow of people, right?
Yeah, right. We're not changing we're not reducing the frequency. That's definitely not part of this. We're simply saying we want to pick up riders at fewer stops, and that can make everybody's trip a little bit faster.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, not to get too abstract about it, but for a better schedule, you want to reduce the number of variables.
Right. I get that. Okay.
Yeah, and a stop is a variable. So the fewer stops you have, you're cutting down on that. With transit signal priority, you make the green light, you don't make the green light, that's a variable. You want to try to always make the green light.
Okay.
Or, how people pay is another variable. So you want more people to pay with the right, the fastest fare media. So there's dozens of different ways that a trip can be affected. Stop spacing is just one of them. But it's like the easiest one for us to address.
Okay, I apologize. I was just trying to understand from my simple bus ridership experiences. Thank you.
Yep. Okay, so just looking ahead, so we've gone through really through much of 2020. We put this plan together, and at this point, we've got some recommendations that we're looking for public feedback on. I think the most notable ones, these don't all affect your neighborhood specifically, but getting feedback on our stop consolidation. We are proposing a new alignment through downtown Minneapolis. So if you ever ride the 3 to Minneapolis, this might interest you. Along with that is an extension to serve the North Loop neighborhood in downtown Minneapolis. So both of those are, they affect just a portion of the route, but I think these are two of the bigger changes that affect a pretty good percent of the riders. And then replacing that Elm-Kasota branch with a separate route. Essentially what we're trying to do there is, this is a way for us to simplify Route 3 and get more service kind of where it should be. And we'll walk through each of these just real quickly. Oh, no, I won't. Before I do that, I do want to touch on changes in your specific neighborhood. I think there are a total of 7 different locations. Most of them are just adding, that ADA pad. So a fairly modest investment, but again, we're trying to improve accessibility and sort of the attractiveness of service. So these are 3 locations, all on Energy Park Drive, that today don't have an ADA pad. We are planning on installing those here. And then here are 4 more locations, 2 on Como and 2 on Front, where likewise they either don't have an ADA pad or it is not like it's not a, doesn't qualify and meet the ADA standards for a pad. So, looking up at the stop up here in the upper left, Como at Balua, I don't even know, Balua Lane. This is near Como Park. Just as an example, where you can almost see the stop there in the far distance. We're saying that stop really should be closer to this crosswalk. We want to drop people off where there's a sidewalk and they can cross more safely. At some of these other ones, this at Maryland, the pad isn't right. At Grotto in Front, the pad that's there is just in real disrepair. It's not ADA compliant. The shelter's too big for the site. So a lot of these little, I don't want to call them insignificant by any means, but this is kind of where this project shines, is that we're finally paying attention to these little things that have been overlooked for years and years and years. So these are the items specific to your neighborhood. Looking now route wide, this is a map of, you'll see both the proposed stop changes and then that realignment through downtown Minneapolis. So the proposal is to have it run on Washington Avenue, and it would just go straight across Washington, across Hennepin to serve the North Loop. And again, this is not your neighborhood, so I will skip ahead. Here is your neighborhood. So I've put these little lines indicating the rough boundaries. So there'll definitely be some stops that we're proposing to reduce. Some had actually already come out. Como has been going through a progression of projects over the years. And so a few of the stops on Como near Snelling actually have already come out when they did that road construction last year. So these are the ones that we're recommending going forward. And we can come back to this if you want to ask about a specific stop. This, maybe doesn't affect you as much, but it's that Elm-Kasota branch. We're going to be operating a circulator instead. The benefit here for most folks is that every trip today that serves Elm-Kasota is one less that serves Como. And Como is really where we see the most ridership. Like this stretch of Como is probably the busiest part of the route. And we're looking for ways to add service where we have the most customers. Just kind think about like the schedule here. So this started last year in the first quarter of 2020. We are now in the first quarter of 2021. Again, we're doing that customer engagement. We have the plan. I think we have a pretty good plan, but it's nothing's final until we hear from the public. So there's another week or so where there's a survey that's still out there. And after this, we will take a look at those responses. We have gotten a lot of feedback from the survey, and we will update the plan accordingly. I'm hopeful that folks like what they're seeing, so but I don't know yet. And you know, for me, like the big part, the next biggest thing after that is coordinating with Minneapolis and St. Paul on actually implementing these changes. So there's a lot of work that go into the signage changes. You wouldn't think it'd be such a big deal, but there's a lot of signage out there that needs to get updated with even a single stop. So after that, I'll be working with them in the summer. After that, early August, we'll be reaching out to riders, letting them know what to expect. Probably at that point, doing more onboard outreach, hopefully. And then August 21st is when everything will change then. So the stops will be changed, the routing will be changed, the schedule and the whole 9 yards. So that's what I have. Happy to take questions or comments, your feedback.
Are there questions for Michael while we've got him here?
Yeah, Michael, would you be able to speak to certain service reductions along Front Avenue, like certain stops and perhaps like why they were removed? I'm just looking at a few on a map here that I have on the metrotransit.org/Route 3 map.
Yep, is that the same as what I'm showing on the screen here?
No, mine's it's like a Google map.
Well,
that
okay,
one of your
yeah, it
colleagues,
should match what you're seeing here though.
Yep, okay. So one of the service reductions that I'm looking at right now is the one at Front and St. Albans. I know that stop actually serves a couple different apartment complexes with a lot of different people in them. And I know that there's one end of it sort of at Como Front Dale. And then there's another one over at the corner of Grotto, which is right near that really big apartment complex on Grotto in front. But there's two other apartment complexes near there, near St. Albans. I'm just wondering, since it just seems like there's quite a lot of people in that area. And then if I look further down the street and I go like towards Barrett, Milton, Ryde, Chatsworth, those are mostly, for the most part, those are just single family homes. But there appear to be more stops there or per area. So like there's one on Barrett, there's one on Milton, two in a row there. So would it be possible to re-examine the St. Albans one, just simply because there's so many complexes in that area?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so I do just want to clarify, and maybe this is going to be just the language. We're not reducing service, so we're not proposing any service reductions. I think what you're saying is the stop change, though.
Stop changes. Yes, I apologize.
Yeah, so you know, at this point normally I would have bounced off and look at Google Maps to see exactly what this intersection looks like. You know, I'm sort of in this presentation view, so I can't do that right now. You know, what I would say is, in general, we try not to make changes to our higher ridership stops. So I would have to look back at the ridership numbers there. I don't have them like on the screen here in front of me, so I apologize about that. The reason you're seeing sort of that weirder stop spacing north of the cemetery, the blocks are a different length there. It's just different enough so that it kind of messes the quarter-mile spacing. And I had initially proposed eliminating all of these actually, and then putting in a new pair at Victoria. We ended up kind of backing away from that because this is going to get really into the weeds, but like the south side doesn't have sidewalks, and there is no like the construction costs would have been more expensive because you'd had to build like a ramp in and stuff. So, you know, these are, I don't know, maybe that was the wrong decision. I'm not sure. But we, in that area, we opted, instead of clearing it all out and putting a new pair of stops in, we opted just to retain those two in the middle. I do agree that ridership in that stretch is fairly low. I mean, again, you're only, you know, there's a lot of people on the south side of Front there, but there's not a lot of ridership. You know, there's
Like I said,
good
it is
density
a
in
lot of
cemeteries, but not a
yeah.
lot of riders. So
zing.
So
Oh, man.
I'll have to take a look at St. Albans. I mean, again, we tried to be pretty, I don't want to say firm, but like, you know, every other block, we made a couple exceptions. You see that on Maryland at Arundel. We did keep that extra pair of stops in there. Again, this is like a ridership. There's like some, you know, lower income housing up there that we kept it in. So to say, you know, and we tried to be selective where those were though. So I'll try to look into the exact situation at St. Albans, but
if you could, yeah, that'd be good. It just anything that's near Como Front Dale, that particular intersection can be tough for a lot of people to cross, or things
that's a
like
terrible
that. So,
intersection.
yeah, yeah.
It's just, I mean, I was out there doing some field work and just trying to cross, and oh man, what a nightmare.
Yeah, I did have one other route comment on the stop at Spencer and Energy Park. Looks like that one is going to be going away at the corner of Spencer Road West, like Spencer Road West and Energy Park. There's a lot of rental complexes there, and since Energy Park is so spaced out, right, there's not a lot of stops there to begin with. So if you were to eliminate, if that one were to go away, that would basically mean that they'd have to go like all the way to the other end of the complex of this really big like rental complex to get here. I think it's McLaren Hill is the community there, the complex.
Okay, I bounced out. I just want to see where you're talking
about.
If you
could. So Spencer and Energy Park, Spencer Road West and Energy Park Drive. Right near Energy Lane. Lots of energy in that area.
Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. And where's our current stop? We've got a stop at.
We got one at Carling. You got one at Carling?
Yeah, boy, these street names are just like so messed up.
I think you guys call it at Bandana Boulevard and at Energy Lane. But Ben is referring to the streets that are on the north side of Energy.
Oh, yeah, okay. So
yeah,
I got what you're saying here. So yeah, Spencer, yeah, okay. So let's see here. I mean, right. I think this is an example of where, you know, the busier stops over at I think you call it Bandana Boulevard were retained at the expense of those on Spencer. You know, here again, I should have printed off or grabbed the ridership numbers here. This is less than a block walk. I do feel like, you know, I think we're asking other people to walk a block, and I think that this is an area where we can ask, you know, if, again, this is in the middle of this public outreach, so we might hear back from folks saying, no, this isn't okay. The sidewalks in this area are a little weird because they're primarily on the north side of the street. So that could be taken into account. I mean, what we typically do, we'll go out with maybe a little bit more aggressive plan than what we will ultimately implement. And then it's easier to walk stuff back even post implementation, it is relatively easy to add stops back in. And so we wanna go out with a fairly like aggressive plan, see what people think. And even if they miss the engagement phase, if we hear from folks after the fact, the nice thing about just taking stops out is that they're pretty easy to put back in. And for Route 2, that was our first project. You know, we ultimately did that. There was a stretch where there was a little bit more of a gap. We heard from folks. You know, they're worried about safety, et cetera. And I understood, and we put it back in, and it worked out fine. So I can look into the numbers and get back to you or Michael, or I don't know how you want to do that, but I'd be happy to share more information on that.
Thank you.
But you're targeting at a block either way, 2 block spacing nominal, right? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I would say like the ideal is a 1/4 mile.
Okay.
And for Route 3, you know, much of it is actually on a fairly good grid pattern. You get areas like Energy Park Drive where it's not. And I mean, my attitude is if there's still a block, or excuse me, if there's still a stop less than a block away, I would consider that at least eligible for consolidation. I
could picture Bandana Square, as you said, McLaren Hills, or I get confused the names of the places. I can picture the road. I don't know the distances, but it seems like in the ballpark. So anyway.
Yeah, and you know, again, absolutely. So we've been talking about these stops.
Yep.
Right here. Yeah.
Yeah, I can picture it. I just was trying to, you know, I think your target is in the ballpark. It's like you said, you got to get some experience on it as well. So, thanks.
I think we've got a question from our Michael too here.
I have a couple of them, so if anyone else has questions, I'd say go ahead. Otherwise, I'll just start with my list.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up this other map though real quick. Go ahead though, Michael.
Okay, so first, Michael, you can send those riderships to me, and I'll share them with the rest of the committee. I know that when those stops on Como between Snelling and Hamlin were eliminated as part of the road construction last summer, you or somebody did share those ridership numbers, and they were pretty low for the most part. So
yeah.
It'll give us a chance to examine kind of where the threshold is. So I appreciate that. Want to say of all the ADA improvements you're making, we definitely want to say thank you for putting the one in Como Park that you have designated as Como and Beulah Lane.
Yep.
That's not only a badly needed upgrade, but really an equity issue. There's no housing there, but it's people who use the park and employees who use the park. And you know, if they're taking a bus to the zoo or to the conservatory or to a job, it's really important that they have a better place to wait. And you know, our offices are near there. I ride my bike past there all the time, and it's pretty sad. People are kind of crouched against those bushes and in the mud, and so moving the stop and putting in a pad, I think, will be a great improvement. I want to thank you guys for recognizing that. As far as, like you said, stops could be put back in just kind of for your future information. So we're just talking about Energy Park Drive near Bandana Boulevard. So there is going to be a new apartment building going up there. I think it's still close. Yeah, let me see your new map. I think it is still, yeah, so you're retaining those those stops, so that's good, but just be aware that there's going to be 100 and something new units there, so that could change.
Yeah, this is actually an area where we get pretty good ridership on Energy Park Drive. I was surprised because like this kind of land use doesn't often generate that great a ridership because it's so auto oriented. But there really is, the ridership here is better than you'd expect.
Okay. And similarly near there there's a longer range plan to put a family shelter near there as well. So that would definitely increase ridership. So just something for you to monitor
Yeah.
in the future. And obviously we can follow up if when those projects actually get finished. One of the things you mentioned was saving time on a route. So I have kind of two questions related to that. So with the Better Bus Routes plan, how much time would you save on Route 3A, for example?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have a specific number for you right now. It depends on the number of stops and the expected ridership of those stops. So we'll do that calculation once we have really the final list, because right now this is still, I would just describe this as the staff recommendations. I mean, I do want to be realistic on the travel time savings. What we've seen on other routes is somewhere between 5 and 10%, which is, modest. You've got your BRT routes, they're saying 20 to 25%. That's great. If we can get 10%, I'd be really happy, frankly. But, for riders, every minute counts. And I would say as much as it is about the travel time, the reliability is maybe even a bigger factor for people. And so if we can get a combination of a little bit faster and a little bit more reliable, I think that's a big win.
Okay, and related to that, and maybe related to the question that Rich asked earlier, so you say you're not reducing the frequency, but if you're saving time and eliminating stops, does that mean you will run a greater number of buses over the course of the day, so possibly actually increasing frequency?
No, unfortunately, that's not the plan right now. I mean, the time that we save is not likely to yield enough of a benefit to add like another bus into the cycle. And certainly not for all day. I mean, this route actually has fairly good frequency today, and we're probably going to be sticking with that. In the future, again, this is proposed for BRT improvements. I think that's where you'd be much more likely to see a significant frequency improvement. But we're not proposing that today. If anything, we can gain a little bit of frequency up here on Como, because trips that are now serving El Casoda will go up there. We might do a little schedule cleanup in terms of having the trips spaced more evenly, but the savings of a few minutes isn't enough, unfortunately, to yield, additional frequency sort of at no cost, if that's what you're.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I wish it was. I mean, what we often do is we'll put that extra time into what's called recovery at the end of the route. And then the benefit of that, well, maybe small, but is to make sure that the trips start on time. Because what can happen is that if a bus is really late and they have too short of a recovery, then the operator doesn't have time to use the restroom or do whatever they need to do at the end of the route to start the next trip on time. And so that's a way for us to both provide a more reliable schedule so that they hopefully won't be getting there as late. And if they are, they might have an extra minute or two so that if they are late, they'll be able to start the next trip on time. So this is all sort of related to that reliability aspect.
Okay, that's all great information. Thank you. You say you have a target date of August 21st for implementation. I'm sure you're aware that's right before the state fair. Just want to know if that has been factored into your thinking or not, because that will greatly affect the reliability when you first launch this new service.
Right. It probably won't help our reliability numbers. The 21st, here's how it works, is that there are these 4 like quarterly picks at Metro Transit. And that's the opportunity for operators to pick a new route. That's when we do our schedule, our route changes. So there's basically these 4 days through the year where a project like this can be implemented. We do not make changes like this in the winter, so I would not, you know, and part of it is just optics, but it's a lot easier transition for folks to walk that extra block when it's sunny and 70 than, you know, when it's 30 degrees. So we're really down to 2 different days in the year, the spring pick, which is in June, and then the fall pick, which this year is in August. So, you know, there weren't too many options. I get that it's right by State Fair, but we're just gonna have to grind through it. And, you know, I think everybody understands that reliability will take a hit, but.
Okay. And my last question is really not so much related to the Route 3 changes, but since ADA is one of the factors you're putting in, the thing we hear in our office the most about is the lack of snow removal at bus stops. Is there anything Metro Transit is doing to increase the number of stops that are cleared of snowbanks?
I mean, yes and no. Like, that's not my area. I can try to tell you what I know, which is sort of secondhand. I hear that all the time as well. I used to sit on the Minneapolis Pedestrian Advisory Committee. Snow removal came up every meeting. I'm on my own neighborhood's transportation committee. Snow removal comes up all the time. I get that it's a big deal. I get that like a real ongoing barrier for folks. I think the approach that we've used at Metro Transit, maybe this is imperfect, but there is sort of a hierarchy of snow clearance, and it starts with getting drivers to work, so clearing out our facilities, and then it goes to park and rides, things that we own, and then rail stations, and then BRT stops, and there's sort of a list that you work down. And we do shelters, and then it's really only like after those have been tackled, that there is a list of like regular bus stop locations, and that is based on limited mobility boardings. It's like a combination of ridership and limited mobility boardings. So we try to get the stops that have kind of the highest combination of people using them and people with limited mobility using them. And that's sort of that next list that we work down. And I can just say that I think it's rare that they even get done with that list before it snows again. So that's often what happens, is that there's, they'll get going on that, they'll work their way through, and then it snows, and then the process sort of has to start over. So I don't have a very satisfying answer for you. I mean, what I can say is it's easier to shovel out a stop that has a concrete ADA pad than one that doesn't. So I know in my neighborhood, if the stop nearest me is unshoveled, that actually just got an ADA pad in because it was part of the 63 project. It's easier for the neighborhood to chip into that, and I as a resident will do that, or businesses, or other organizations. That is not really the perfect solution here. But I can say that I don't think there's ever going to be a point where we, Metro Transit, shovel out every stop. There is just too many stops to get through. I mean, there's, thousands of bus stops, and we don't have the resources to get to everything.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that's the end of my questions. Appreciate it, Michael.
Questions for Michael?
I actually had a few questions as well that came up during that. Will you be retaining the 3S, the limited service route that stops at Snelling Avenue? Or will just the A and the B 3-line be kept?
That's a good question. I don't think that's finalized. Obviously the A and the B are the 2 main branches. I did mention, a couple of times that the a goal is to reduce the number of these short lines. The S is one of those.
Right.
So yeah, we would be looking at having this Como Eustis terminal as, to the extent possible, the main sort of eastern terminal for those short line trips.
Okay, because I'm a rider of the 3 bus line, and what I've observed is that oftentimes, you know, with the university in session, a lot of the university students are, you know, live along Como Avenue and use those routes such that with the number of stops that are there, the buses will get sort of bunched up and they'll all arrive at like Como and Cleveland, one right after the other. And it can be difficult because, for example, I would rather not ride the 3S, I would rather get the 3A. But if it's, you know, the third one or in the middle of the bus stop, sometimes it can be hard to figure out, to signal to the driver which bus I want to get on. And so that's one thing that I've noticed about the 3 bus route is, especially at rush hours and when school is in session at the university, there are a lot of issues, especially on like the western side of the route with
Going eastbound, you mean?
Yeah, going eastbound from the west. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, what I can say is there are some techniques to try to avoid that. You know, of staging buses so that they leave spaced apart enough so that you reduce that bus bunching. It is kind of a weird phenomenon, and it is just a naturally occurring one that buses will tend to bunch. So there are some things you can do to try to address it, but in particular, like at a very busy time of day, it is almost unavoidable that if you send a bus out 2 or 3 minutes ahead of the next one, it gets to that stop at the U of M, and it takes a couple of minutes for people just to board there because there's such high ridership. And then here comes the follower behind it, and it's empty. You know, this bus bunching, it is a major challenge. I don't think there's any like easy way to fix it. We do try to address that, and you know, in terms of boarding volumes, you know, we try to send the U of M short lines first, but it is a real challenge to avoid that bunching.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah, so thanks for addressing that.
You guys had some very good questions. Like I said, I had this presentation earlier today, and there just wasn't time for questions, so I'm happy to take yours. I will. The other thing I'll just say, since you didn't ask, is that we have this survey. We've gotten an incredible amount of responses from our survey. So I think when it's all said and done, there'll be over 700 surveys that we'll be looking through. A good % of them, from what I can see, are folks that have identified as with a disability. So I'm always, most interested in reading those, because in some ways those are the people that have the biggest impact. I'm not allowed to look at the results yet though, so I don't know.
And Michael, did I hear there was a closing of the survey next week?
March 12th, yeah. Yeah, so if you're willing to share that, that'd be great. The window is still open. Yep.
I did just put the direct link to the survey in the chat over here, so if anyone wants to be able to access it, that would be a direct way to do so. So are there any other questions for Michael while we've got him here? Well, thank you so much for your time today, and for obviously we have, we have an interest in good rapid transit and public transit around in our area. So I'm sure that we will continue to work to get this information out, and I expect once the changes are made, people will have opinions that they want to share.
Yeah, absolutely. And and I'll just say this might not be for a few years, but again, the H line for BRT will be this Como, Maryland alignment. So this will not be the final time that you hear from Metro Trans. There might be a gap, but we'll certainly be back.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Yep.